Good morning. Welcome to the Bell and Pollock Legal Show. I'm Gary Bell, along with Brad Pollock. Our law firm is Bell and Pollock. We are injury attorneys. We've been representing injured victims for over 25 years. If you've been injured, we can help you put your lives back together again. Let's face it, when you have an accident, when you're injured, that's just not an ordinary day for you. It's exceptional. It's extraordinary. You're not trained in the field, but the insurance adjusters and the insurance companies on the other side that go against you are trained. It is an ordinary day for them. This is what they do. This is what they're trained for. And don't believe they're not going to try to take advantage of you. They're going to try to reduce, mitigate, obliterate, abolish your claim. Reduce it down as low as they can get it. And that's what they do every day. And you need to have information. You need to be empowered. That's what we try to do here on the Bell and Pollock Legal Show. On these shows, we try to cover a different injury subject each week. We have other shows that are call-in shows on any subject, but these shows are injury shows, and we've been doing it for a long time. We're glad to do it. You can also go to our website, championsofthepeople.com. If you want to listen to any of these podcasts, you can do that. They're free. You can download them. You can play them. You can save them. They're helpful information. They give you an equal playing field with the insurance company. And now you know what your rights are. You know what to do. And if you've ever been injured, you can come in for a free initial consultation. We give you a free legal game plan. It's taken years to develop all the points in this legal game plan, and we do it for you, and you can benefit from our experience. Our telephone number is 303-795-5900. In the mountains, it's 970-870-8989. And as always, anytime, anywhere, on the website, championsofthepeople.com. Okay, today we're talking about if you're injured in a car crash. That's our usual scenario. You're injured in a car crash and you're a passenger in the car. And so what are your rights? So let's start with the basics. It's going to get a little bit more complicated. So hang in there. You're going to learn a lot today about passengers. And you can say, well, I thought that was going to be a lot easier or simpler than that, but it's not. It can become quite complicated. So first we have you're a passenger in a car. Another car strikes your car. And so who's at fault? And what difference does it make, Brad? And what do these insurance companies look at? And what do you need to look at?
Well, it always makes a difference that who's at fault when you start talking about liability insurance and who's going to pay for or who's going to be responsible for the other person's injuries, because the negligent party always pays for the victims or the non-negligent party's injuries. But we've gone almost full circle in this state, I think, Gary. We started out with the no fault or med pay coverage, and we had no fault that was quite substantial. And then we went to no fault, and we let that law sunset. And then next thing you know, we're back at having med pay, which is to provide at least some kind of minimum coverage to people who are involved in accidents regardless of fault. And that's what it's about. When you start talking about med pay, generally the big area you have to look at, it covers people who are involved in an accident regardless of fault. It's something that is absolutely necessary. You really have to have it. And it has very far-ranging effects on how many people and who gets covered and really what's available to.
Right, and we've done a show on MedPay. We're going to get a little bit more into MedPay in this show, but right now, so you've got an accident by the other car. You're a passenger in this car number one. Car number two runs into you, causes the accident. And so you're trying to figure out who you're going to collect your damages, injuries, and losses from. Who's going to pay you? Well, there's an insurance company, liability insurance. That's what we're talking about. We're going to get to other types in a minute. Liability insurance of car number two, the car that ran into you, and there's liability insurance for car number one, the car you're in. But you have to determine who was responsible for the accident. That's what triggers the liability insurance, and the insurance company has to pay for your damages, injuries, and losses. So, Brad, if car number two that runs into your car, if they're 100% liable, and pay attention to that, if they're 100% liable, then how does the liability insurance work for that situation?
Well, depending on how much they've got, the liability insurance is going to step in to pay for all the injuries to all the people who are involved in your car, in car number one. If car number two is the negligent party and 100% liable.
Right.
Now, there's also the fact that you could have passengers in car number two And if they're not part of the negligence, if they haven't caused part of the negligence and no liability, they also can look to the driver of car number 2 for responsibility to get their coverage and to get their bills paid and to get their losses under the liability policy. So you could have quite a few people attacking that policy. And if you've got a policy that's very low, you're going to hope and you're going to want to make sure that you as a passenger, when you've gotten into somebody's car, have basic protections that are available to you.
Right, but your first claim is going to go, you're a passenger in car number 1. Car number 2 caused the accident. It's determined, and this is important, this is critical, the car number 2 was 100% at fault, because in a minute, we're going to give you an example. If your driver was partially at fault and the driver of car number 2 was partially at fault, what happens? But right now, we're assuming the car number 2, the one that hit you in your car number 1, car number 2 driver is 100% at fault, so you're going to go after their liability insurance for your damages, injuries, and losses. And let's say you sustain some significant damages, injuries, and losses. Then the question, as Brad just said, was how much liability insurance, think about that, does car number 2 have, and how many people is it going to be divided among? There might be multiple people. There might be 4 or 5 people in both cars. And so they all have claims, and so it's going to have to be divided out. Now, Brad, let's assume for a second, so everybody gets educated on this. We're talking about liability insurance only. We're going to get to the other parts in a minute. Car number 2 is partially at fault, and car number 1 driver, the car you're in a passenger in, is partially at fault. So now there's 2 liability policies in effect, one for car number 2 and one for car number 1.
Right now, you've got the driver car number 1 and driver car number 2 squaring off with their insurance companies and themselves to determine what percentage of liability there is. If one of them has more than 50%, then that one's going to be responsible in that percentage amount, which means if car number 2 is 51%, then car number 2 is going to be responsible to the driver car number 1 in the amount of 51% of car number 1's driver's damages. Now the passengers have a whole different claim, whole different set of rights, because the passengers actually have, unless some of these, there's always some changes and nuances concerning the relationship among the passengers, but basically the passengers can potentially look to the driver of car number 1 and the driver of car number 2 to pay for the passenger's injuries.
Exactly. And so then you're making a claim against the insurance company for car number 2. You're making a claim against the insurance company for car number 1, your driver, and they might be your friend. They might be a family member. It can sometimes end relationships, but when you've been damaged significantly, you can't just leave it alone. You can't ignore it. You've got to do it, and because you only get one shot, one chance at this. So there's an example of how you can collect or try to collect for liability insurance or car number 2 and car number 1 because they are both at fault. That was the critical part. If only one's at fault, then you don't do that. So your damages, injuries, and losses, and we've done shows on that. So generally we're talking about you can't work, you lost wages, you've lost wages, you got medical bills of 30 grand, 40 grand, you may need neck surgery, 75 to 100 grand. You lost the quality of life, non-economic damages, pain and suffering, and physical injuries. So there's a lot of categories of damages that can be collected, but you've got to go after the insurance companies for the liability insurance, and that's when it's necessary to know what the liability insurance is. So, Brad, let's just change the facts a little bit here. We had just one car was responsible and liable. You're a passenger in the non-fault car, so you go after against the insurance company for the at-fault party. Then you got 2 cars that are at fault. You go after the insurance company on both of those. So let's talk about MedPay. I mean, we've done a show on MedPay and why you need it and all that, but this is going to become crystal clear to you. Let's talk about MedPay. You're a passenger in car number 1. There's an accident. And so whose MedPay applies? The driver of your car? Where do you get your medical bills paid? Who pays for your medical bills when you're a passenger?
Well, as a passenger of car number 1, if in fact when the accident occurs, if the owner of car number 1, that's where we're looking for the insurance first. If that person's insurance includes MedPay, that's probably, there are going to always be some alternate circumstances that you have to look at as far as residency and as far as whether or not the policy, if there's any language limiting it. And, Gary, we won't even get into, or maybe we can later in the show, we won't even get into the reason you're a passenger.
Right.
If you're ride sharing, if you're paying for the ride, if you're carpooling, the reason for being a passenger, because sometimes the policies don't apply if you're depending on what the circumstances is. And we did a show about this.
You did. We did a show on that.
We had a show that talked about that, and we can always redo it. But the bottom line is basically if it's just somebody getting in the car and going for a ride with you, that passenger is going to look to your med pay first.
Right.
And your med pay being if you're the owner of the car.
Right. And, there are many exceptions, and we can't cover them all here, and Brad just covered one of them. I mean, there's a whole different relationship when you ride share. And what about picking up kids to go to school? What about taking turns? You're the mom, you're the dad. And so that changes the relationship, and it changes what we're talking about today. Okay, and so what if you're paying to have this done? What if you share in gas? What if you share in expenses? What if you take turns in expenses? So we're not covering those subjects today. Those who can be and are very complicated. They can be and be sorted out, yes. But very complicated areas. All right, we got a break coming up. You're listening to the Bell and Pollock Legal Show. Gary Bell, Brad Pollock. Our website is championsofthepeople.com. We'll be right back.
Ready for an extraordinary lunch? As fast or as slow as you want it? With all fresh ingredients? Caitlin's Restaurant has it all. Express lunches that won't keep you waiting. Or if you prefer, lunch served in that old-fashioned homemade style. All made fresh on the spot. Whether it's a fresh-made sandwich with homemade chips, quesadilla loaded with cheddar or jack cheeses, or scratch-made soups, you'll find everything you love at Caitlin's. Caitlin's is located on Mississippi just east of Colorado Boulevard next to Bookies. How about green chili chicken stew? Think about a variety of fresh-made sandwiches or 11 different kinds of burgers made to order with 1/2 pound of the finest USDA choice lean ground beef. You might favor a homemade New Mexican recipe with carne adobada burritos, chicken enchiladas, carnitas burritos, served with hash browns, special recipe beans, cheeses with guacamole, and your choice of homemade red or green chili sauces. For those who prefer the lighter side, there are fresh made salads and lighter fares, sure to delight. Try Caitlin's for lunch or breakfast on Mississippi, just east of Colorado Boulevard next to Bookies. Call 303-798-6600. You'll love it every bite of the way.
What you see is what you get. What you don't hear is everything. Let's talk about silence, old-fashioned silence. What does silence have to do with injuries? I'm going to give you about 3 seconds of silence. Here you go. Silence is what you get just before a collision. Sometimes in accidents, fast turns to slow and noise turns to silence. Then the collision, then the injuries, then the life-changing event. Then starts the battle with the insurance company. Hi, I'm Gary Bell of the law firm of Bell & Pollock. At Bell & Pollock, we understand that those 3 seconds of silence can turn your life upside down. We know how devastating injuries can be. You may not be able to work. You have medical bills. You need treatment. Listen, don't get hurt twice. Once in the accident and again on the insurance claim. Talk to the lawyers who actually care about you, the injured victim. Bell & Pollock, Colorado's premier injury law firm. Our website is championsofthepeople.com or call us at 303-795-5900. One call, that's all. Good morning. Welcome back to the Bell and Pollock Legal Show. Gary Bell, Brad Pollock. Our law firm is Bell and Pollock. We're conveniently located in Greenwood Village, basically I-25 in Orchard. We have an office in Steamboat Springs. We do cases all over the state of Colorado. Big cases, small cases, medium cases. We do auto accident cases and workers' comp cases. So today we're talking about passengers. We just left off on MedPay. Let's talk about MedPay a little bit.
Okay, MedPay is an important aspect of your insurance policy. It's so important that once again, as we talked about last week, there are certain provisions that are automatically included in your insurance policy, and that the only way you don't have MedPay is you have to opt out. You have to sign a written document that says you have considered it, you know what it is, and you're opting out, and you don't want the MedPay. MedPay is going to cover the first $5,000 of your medical expenses if you're in the car and you've been hurt. This is anybody. And I want to stress a little bit more that it can cover the first $5,000 of a car-related accident. So if you're a pedestrian and you get hit by a car, you have a chance, you have a very large chance or a big chance that MedPay is going to cover the first $5,000 of you, the pedestrian's bills. So MedPay is a very, very important aspect that you need to make sure you have coverage. First coverage is going to go to the person who owns the car. It goes to the car. It goes with the car. And so One of the things when you're a passenger in a car, all of you stop and think right now, how many times you've gotten in a car with somebody or you've had your son or daughter or your spouse get in the car with somebody, and have you stopped and asked them, do you have med pay? You presume they have insurance because that's required. But the only real required insurance in Colorado is a 2550 liability policy that covers human beings. So, do you ask them, do you have med pay? Because if they don't have med pay, now that's not available to any of the passengers through the owner's insurance, through that car driver's insurance.
And you raised a really interesting point, Brad, but let's just say you're a passenger in car number one and there's an accident. And of course, you don't ask them, do you have med pay? They're friends or family, whatever. Or maybe just a friend driving the car. You're a passenger. So whose med pay applies? You're the passenger. Let's say they had the driver had $5,000 in med pay. Let's say you have $20,000 in medical bills and growing and ongoing and treating. And so, who's primary for the med pay, and what do you do when you're the passenger? That's what we're talking about today.
And what's going to happen when you're the passenger? The primary coverage is going to go to the driver of the car. And sometimes I have to be careful because if the driver of the car is not the owner of the car, you can be looking at the owner of the car policy. You can look at the driver of the car policy, and then you can look at your own policy. And the primary is going to go to the person who has the first requirement to provide insurance. And really, the first person who has a requirement to provide insurance is the owner of the car. Go try and get your driver's or your license plates without car insurance.
Right, you can't do it.
It's not going to happen.
But, we've covered in other shows on the details and ins, outs of med pay, so we're not going to cover those in detail today, but we are talking about med pay. It's a part of your car insurance policy. It's called a medical payments coverage. The lingo is med pay, and so you're a passenger in the car. There's an accident. So the driver's med pay, the driver's insurance company, the med pay for that driver, whatever amount they got, is primary and first to cover you as a passenger for your medical bills and expenses. But let's say that's exhausted. Let's say they got the minimum of $5,000. They didn't ask, which you should, of any higher amounts. They didn't protect themselves or their passengers for any higher amounts. So let's say your medical bills are $20,000. The med pay for the driver of your car, where you're a passenger, is $5,000. You've exhausted that. So now where does the passenger go for more payment of medical bills?
Well, and this could be subject to the terms of the policy concerning primacy and concerning whether or not there's got to be a co-sharing or whether or not there's no coverage. So you got to look at the policy. But any good lawyer is going to get the passenger's car insurance policy and is going to look to see if they can invoke a med pay right or coverage from the passenger's own car insurance policy. Now, if the passenger doesn't have car insurance, but is a member of a household that does have car insurance, then you're going to be getting all members' household policies, cover automobile policies, to see if you can invoke and stack additional med pay.
You just said something critical. It's not automatic. You need to see and investigate, and that's what attorneys do. Investigate all the insurance available, try to find the insurance. But first of all, the driver of your car, number one, you're the passenger. The driver's med pay covers you. All right, that's exhausted. So probably, depending on language and policies, probably your own med pay coverage on your own car insurance policy, even though you're not driving the car at the time, covers you for additional medical bills and expenses. That's why you want your med pay as high as possible. You want to protect yourself, you want to protect your passengers if you're the driver. But today's example is you're a passenger in a car. So let's say the driver had $5,000 of coverage, med pay. You exhausted that for your medical bills as a passenger. Let's say you as a passenger had the minimum statutory amount and you didn't waive it on your own car insurance policy of $5,000. That's been used up. So that's 5 and 5, that's 10. So you had $20,000 in medical bills. You have $10,000 left. Well, what's going to happen and how are those bills going to get paid? And so those cover or carry on over into health insurance coverage and sometimes liens with doctors if you have no health insurance coverage. That's why you want your med pay as high as possible, period. Now, you have the right to collect your medical bills from the at-fault party, but that's a longer process. They don't have to pay your medical bills as you go to the doctor. That's at the end when you get the settlement. So what has to pay your medical bills as you go to the doctor is the med pay of the driver, the med pay of your own car insurance policy, and that's why Brad and I say you need to get those as high as possible.
And this is a very confusing area a lot. It's confusing in a number of areas, and this is why I've encouraged people many times. I've told them that there's two things you want to do. First of all, if you're going to be in a situation where you or a member of your family are going to be a passenger in a car very often, or if you're in a situation where you or a member of your family is going to be the driver of passengers in cars very often. And when I mean passengers in cars, I mean people other than your immediate family who's living in your household with you. Then you need to get in touch with your insurance agent. You need to get in touch with a lawyer. You need to get in touch with somebody who's knowledgeable. You need to get the information about how this med pay is going to work under your particular circumstances. You may be opening up a whole can of worms, but it's better you open it up before anybody's hurt, before somebody's in the hospital, before somebody's getting bills that are going to adversely affect their credit rating, before all these expenses hit. It's time. You need to do it now and get it covered.
Well, you do, and because there are many exceptions to what we're talking about today, and I think you can already understand and appreciate how difficult and complex this area is. And you say, well, we're just talking about a passenger, but it becomes very complex. And as the mathematicians used to say, there's a lot of permutations to this incident and different ways that people can go. We're giving you the basic flavor of the situation. All right, let's start talking about. You have 2 car accidents, Brad, and they're both at fault, but car number 2 doesn't have any insurance whatsoever, and car number 1, which you're a passenger, has some insurance. Now the car number 2 is uninsured. What happens then?
Well, now we're going to be stepping outside a little bit of the med pay rules here, because we're going to be talking about some other things. But basically what we're looking at while we're doing this is we're going to be saying, first of all, the med pay of the car, of your car, number 2, is going to kick in to cover your initial bills and to cover what are the emergency providers, the ambulance. It's going to cover the people in the emergency room. Actually, there's what I would call a pecking order, Gary. It goes, first of all, your ambulance people get paid the first amounts out of that med pay. Then it goes to the emergency room people. Then if there's money left over, can start paying the regular bills. But it's going to be that amount of coverage, like $5,000 coverage for each person that's in that car.
Right.
So each person needs to do it. Now, once again, I'm talking about the minimum amounts and what the law says. If somebody's increased it to 10 or 15,000, it may not necessarily be that it's 10, 15, 20, 25, 50,000 on each person, because the policy might say something different. But you're going to have a minimum of 5,000 per person in that car, even if the other car that's responsible for the accident has nothing. And of course, then, Gary, a little bit outside the show, the parameters of this show, then we start talking about uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage. Right.
And so we got a break coming up, but right after the break, we're going to talk about the fact that you're in car number 1 as a passenger, and your status today as a passenger. That's what we're talking about. It can become very complicated. And then you have an accident, and car number 2 that caused the accident has no insurance, no liability insurance, anything. And so med pay is handled a certain way. We've covered that today. But what happens to your damage, injuries, and losses if car number 2, the one who hit you, has no insurance? All right, you're listening to the Bell and Pollock Legal Show. Gary Bell, Brad Pollock. Our telephone number is 303-795-5900. We do all kinds of car accident cases, big ones, medium, small ones. We do them well. We've been doing them for over 25 years. We do workers' compensation cases. We represent injured workers as well, and we can help you put your life back together again. We do cases all over the state of Colorado. We've got an office, again, in Steamboat Springs. We've done them almost in every town. So you can give us a call at our website, championsofthepeople.com. We'll be right back.
Ready for an extraordinary lunch? As fast or as slow as you want it? With all fresh ingredients? Caitlin's Restaurant has it all. Express lunches that won't keep you waiting. Or if you prefer, lunch served in that old-fashioned homemade style. All made fresh on the spot. Whether it's a fresh-made sandwich with homemade chips, quesadilla loaded with cheddar or jack cheeses, or scratch-made soups, you'll find everything you love at Caitlin's. Caitlin's is located on Mississippi just east of Colorado Boulevard next to Bookies. How about green chili chicken stew? Think about a variety of fresh-made sandwiches or 11 10 different kinds of burgers made to order with 1/2 pound of the finest USDA choice lean ground beef. You might favor a homemade New Mexican recipe with carne adobada burritos, chicken enchiladas, carnitas burritos, served with hash brown special recipe beans, cheeses with guacamole, and your choice of homemade red or green chili sauces. For those who prefer the lighter side, there are fresh made salads and lighter fares, sure to delight. Try Caitlin's for lunch or breakfast on Mississippi, just east of Colorado Boulevard next to Bookies. Call 303-798-6600. You'll love it every bite of the way.
What you see is what you get. What you don't hear is everything. Let's talk about silence, old-fashioned silence. What does silence have to do with injuries? I'm going to give you about 3 seconds of silence. Here you go. Silence is what you get just before a collision. Sometimes in accidents, fast turns to slow and noise turns to silence. Then the collision, then the injuries, then the life-changing event, then starts the battle with the insurance company. Hi, I'm Gary Bell of the law firm of Bell Pollock. At Bell Pollock, we understand that those 3 seconds of silence can turn your life upside down. We know how devastating injuries can be. You may not be able to work. You have medical bills. You need treatment. Listen, don't get hurt twice. Once in the accident and again on the insurance claim. Talk to the lawyers who actually care about you, the injured victim. Bell Pollock, Colorado's premier injury law firm. Our website is championsofthepeople.com or call us at 303-795-5900. One call, that's all. Good morning. Welcome back to the Bell and Pollock Legal Show. Gary Bell, Brad Pollock. We are injury attorneys. We're here to help you. We're here to educate you and teach you about injury subjects each week. Today we're talking about passenger liability. And don't forget, if you want a copy of our book, we've written a book. It's free. The name of the book is Don't Get Hurt in the Accident Twice. Once in the accident and again on the insurance claim. You can get it. It's an information-loaded book. You can go to our website, championsofthepeople.com. You click on the ebook. You can download it for free. Or if you just contact us, we'll send you a hard copy for free. So it's very educational. Tells you how to hire an attorney. Tells you the myths in this business, myths of insurance coverage, myths about auto accidents, and it's very informative to read. So we're glad to do it, and you can get a free copy from us. Okay, let's cover this last subject here today, Brad. You're a passenger car number one. Car number two causes the accident, and they have no insurance. And so does the passenger then go to their own coverage, uninsured motorist, or does it go to the driver? And where does the passenger collect their damages, injuries, and losses here?
All right. The passenger is going to look first to, obviously, the at-fault party. No insurance with the at-fault party. Then the passenger is going to look to the med pay and the UIM of the cars, of the person that they're in the car, of the person who's got the car insurance, of the car owner.
So that would be driver of car number one?
Well, if the driver number one is a car owner, yes,
right,
then probably yes.
Right.
If they're not the car owner, then they're going to look to that insurance policy that is with the car, and they're going to look to the driver's other insurance. So if I'm driving your car, Gary, they're going to look to your policy on your car, and they're going to look to my policy as a driver.
Right.
And they're going to look at our med pays. They're going to look at our UIMs.
But so when you're a passenger and the other car has no insurance, you go to your driver of your car, number one, where you're a passenger, to collect your damages, injuries, and losses for coverage, uninsured motorist coverage. And since it's involving an accident with a car, you go to your own coverage to collect from there as well.
And your own med pay.
And
remember now, this med pay covers you whether you're riding with a friend, walking, public transportation. You can be public transportation. In-state, out-of-state, it follows you.
And why does it do that? Because it's, quote, connected to a use of an automobile. That's usually the general language in these insurance policies.
And it has no deductible and no copay.
No deductible, no copay, and they don't get their money back. We have preached about this for years. Okay, you got any questions, just give us a call anytime, 303-795-5900. In the mountains, 970-870-8989. We're glad to receive your calls. Bell and Pollock, injury attorneys. We do all kinds of car crash cases, big ones, medium, small ones. We do workers' compensation. We represent workers and have for years. You can give us a call. Go to our website, championsofthepeople.com. It's information loaded. You can download these podcasts. You can get our new book as well. So Gary Bell, Brad Pollock, we are Colorado's premier injury law firm, and we are your champions of the people.